Hi, I'm Alistair Kroll. I'm one of the chairs of a conference that happens every year in Ottawa, Canada called Forward 50.
I'm Hillary Hartley. I am the CEO of an organization called the U.S. Digital Response, and proud to be co-hosting and co-chair with Alistair of Forward 50.
So we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about where we think bureaucracy is going in the future and how we're going to get around it. One of the core ideas behind Forward 50 is that we look at everything in 3 timeframes. What policies could you change in the next 50 days? What platforms could you build in 50 months? And what society do you want in 50 years? And so we thought we would look at this idea of bureaucracy and how to rethink it in those 3 timeframes. So Hillary, what do you think is going to change in policymaking in the next 50 days?
Everyone's thinking about AI, and there are just lots of opportunities for governments to essentially start building awareness of this technology and what it can bring to their teams, to their services. But I think it really is going to force people to mostly just get comfortable, wrap their heads around it, because we've got policies going out the door that are essentially setting up guardrails for how teams could or should use it. But really, there's a need to almost go up a level, go up 50,000 feet and say, okay, let's understand this a little better. Let's understand what the application could be. Let's understand what data we have that is going to make any of this a success. So I think that's definitely on the tips of folks' tongues for the next 50 days.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by what becomes abundant and what becomes scarce. So many things like grant applications, we're using difficulty as a proxy for quality. So if someone has the time to submit a 100-page application, we assume it's worth looking at. That's going to get really easy to do now. You know, hey, make me a 100-page application. And so a lot of processes where we've relied on friction as a proxy for quality, I think a lot of bureaucratic processes are about to get really, really upheavaled. Let's talk about 50 months and platforms that are being built right now. From my point of view, I see so much bureaucracy and so many problems in government with the software we already have and the platforms we already have that I just want the equivalent of the and-on cord, you know, that rope they used to pull on the manufacturing line when the Japanese were improving their cars. It just seems to me like we don't need new platforms. We just need anybody on the platform able to sort of push a button and say, this process is stupid. And I know you've shared some examples of really bad processes in the past.
Well, there are many, many out there, but there are a lot of good processes too. And I think that's what's been really exciting to see happen over the last 50 months, I would say, and looking toward the next 50 months, thinking about platforms, systems, there's really an opportunity. People are talking about digital infrastructure in a real way. That feels different from even 50 months ago, and certainly several years ago. So folks are really understanding the necessity and power of identity and systems that are going to actually allow me to prove who I am in a seamless way. There's a lot of those kinds of conversations that, again, come back to data, come back to simplistic approaches for governments. That I think that's the continuing thread that I want to pull, is how do we just continue to bring simplicity and focus to folks. Again, whether they're on the front line or the folks building these services, we've got to be enabling them with simple digital infrastructure that can serve their needs.
It really does seem like single sign-on and just radical simplification of everything are the 2 things that are going to get us across the line. There's so much we can do when people are authenticated across these platforms, and we still force them to navigate bureaucracy and say, I want to see my transportation information or my immigration information or my revenue information with the government rather than one timeline. Do you think we're actually going to get to a point where we have like a single pane of glass for your life and your relationship with the government?
I think there are many jurisdictions working on that. The problem right now is federation, and is so many different approaches, whether it's US, Canada, other places that really have states and jurisdictions that are taking unique approaches and trying to get out in front, and I applaud them for that. But the problem is going to be synthesizing and thinking about how I travel, or how I am able to be me wherever I need to be me. And that's a bigger nut to crack.
It does feel like deepfakes are going to be an awfully good reason for us to figure out proper identity. There was that guy in Hong Kong who transferred $25 million because he got on a Zoom call with 3 of his colleagues, but they were all deepfakes. So it'll only take a couple of things like that. Let's move on to 50 years then. I guess when we think about the bureaucracy in 50 years, it's really like, what kind of government do we think we're going to have? And then how do we change the bureaucracy to support it? So in 2022, I did this talk that argued that for one of the Forward 50 keynotes, that argued that given that the printing press got us from the monarchy to the republic, and that the internet is at least as big a change in information as the printing press, we should expect government in 50 years or less to be radically different from what we have now, in the same way that what we have now is different from the monarchy. Am I reading too much sci-fi, or do you think government's going to significantly change in a world where, we're always connected online? We still use voting and representation that was invented in the Middle Ages.
I think you're definitely onto something. And I would say that it should take 50 years. There's a necessity for government to be deliberate. We can't run fast and break things. They can't run fast and break things. But I believe one of the biggest things and one of the biggest shifts, both over the last 50 months and more, and definitely for the next many years, is enabling government to empower teams to figure out how to, in controlled environments and situations that make sense, how to run fast. Maybe not break too many things, but how to run fast. And there's just a lot of energy that needs to be spent in that arena to allow government to shift, because it's not just going to be the fact that this digital infrastructure is going to shake up things. It's going to mean that the whole machine has to react. The whole machine has to pivot. We've got to figure out budgeting differently. We've got to figure out planning differently. We've got to figure out policy making differently. I really hope that there's a jurisdiction in the next 50 months, but definitely in the next 50 years, that nails rules as code and what that really means. To think from the beginning about our policy in both a user-centered but machine readable way, so that it enables any technology to make things simpler.
So one of the things that I find fascinating is trying to find these bipartisan issues that both parties can, a simple policy like nobody should know more about you than you do. And then both parties can feel like, yeah, I like that. If you're on the political right, it's like, yeah, show me what you know on me. And on the left, you're like, yeah, use that data to help me. And are there any bipartisan bureaucratic things that like there is widespread consensus on right now?
I think the big levers that government has to wrestle with are things like budgeting, things like talent, capacity, giving folks the tools and the people they need to figure out the best path forward. So the hobby horse that I always end up coming back to is, how can government be truly user-centric? How can we focus on what we're there to do, which is get people the information and services that they need? So what is going to enable government to be truly user-centric, customer-centric? I mean, it is everything from how do we budget and keep people at the center? How do we think about governance from A to Z in a way that is keeping people at the center? And then how are we getting them the people, tools, and processes that they need to be able to understand how to make their best next step on that journey?
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone at the Creative Bureaucracy Festival for giving us some time to talk about the future.